Hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue. I'm Kimberly and this is my husband Tim, and we are welcoming you today if you're watching us from our new digs.
Yeah.
And
These are digs?
Yeah, these are
Is
our
that
new
what you call
our
them?
new our new
It's kind of a
home.
cool-
It's for
it's our-
those who don't know.
It's our crib.
Yes,
You
it's our
remember that?
I do.
Something about-
Welcome to my crib, yo.
Yeah. What was the thing? It's like something about fix my crib or
Well, yeah,
No.
you get a
No, it
tour
was
of like the
a tour
yeah,
of
these
a
luxury
celebrity
homes.
crib.
It's
We're
pretty
not
sweet.
celebrities, and this ain't no
I know
crib.
we're missing our chain and we're missing our do-rags.
Yeah, wow. I think that went weird. Okay.
Hey, listen, for those of you who don't know, we have been in a rental for a year, so this is pretty exciting for us to be in our new
Yeah.
home. And if you're watching, it's feeling a little bit like Christmas here
Yeah,
today.
but where's the yak?
I know. The
No
yak.
yak.
The yak.
I don't think anybody's going to be upset about that.
I think there's people who loved the yak in
Who?
the background. Just the weird ones.
I know my brother, who is our faithful, one of our
Yes.
3 faithful listeners, he says, "Hey, I don't like the yak. Get rid of the
Yeah,
yak."
So it's gone. It's been designated to a bedroom upstairs.
Yeah.
But I will say this. if
It's a
you-
guest bedroom if you're ever invited over to stay overnight.
Yes, you
There's
get
a
to
yak
sleep
for
with
you.
our yak.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll get a yak attack in the night.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was going to say, you kind of are also looking like a hot Santa in your buffalo check red and black shirt.
So listen, it's Christmas is coming up.
I know.
You've already decorated the house.
I know, it's so pretty.
We got a nice staircase and a banister, and you
Yeah.
got that going.
Yep.
And I thought I would put this on. I could be either Santa Claus kind of look or a lumberjack.
A lumberjack. Either way, it's working for you, babe.
Yeah.
You look good.
Okay.
So we're starting a new series.
We are on parenting.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
So, hey, we had a great series we just finished a couple of weeks ago on marriage, and such good response. We've had a lot of people ask about parenting. And so we're going to go into parenting. Here's what we've got. We got 5 questions that we're going to answer, and we're just going to kind of share a little bit about that. But we're going to take a couple of weeks to do that, a couple of episodes. And we're taking this from Psalm 127.
Yes.
So
I was just going
I
to
thought
throw
you were
in,
gonna
and
say-
then we have a couple of weeks of Q&A. So
Yeah.
if you have a specific question you want answered regarding parenting, shoot them to us.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions that people email us directly. Hey, we'll email us and we'll be able to put those on. So we need to hear from you right away so we can prepare those answers to
Yes.
your questions. So we look forward to that. But here's the passage. We're going from Psalm 127, the whole chapter. It's only 5 verses long. And the last part, the first part seems like it has very little to do with parenting, but it has everything to do with it. The second part talks about children are a heritage from the Lord. If you've been around Christian church for a while, that passage is used oftentimes at baby dedications or whatever. And it's really a powerful passage. The whole thing is really about child rearing. So I'm going to take the time to read
Break
this
it
whole
down.
thing. I'm going to
Break it
read it,
down.
and then these questions relate to this. So let me read it to you. Or do you want to read it?
Oh, sure.
Why
I'll
don't
read
you
it.
read it? You'll do a better
Psalms
job than me.
127:1. It says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go to late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb with a reward." The fruit of the womb, a reward. "Like arrows in the hand of a warrior," I love that, "are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them." Why do they say man? It's the woman who's got the quiver full.
Yeah, well,
But I
we'll get into
digress.
that.
And then
That's
it says,
sexism in the Old Testament.
"He shall not put to shame. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate."
You know what's interesting? I was just listening as you're reading, and some of the ways that you read that, you've heard this so many times
I know, I
in a
wanted to
different form.
say it in a different
I could
version.
I could tell you were
Yes.
like, I have to reinterpret this.
Yeah.
So often that's true. Anyway, this is English Standard Version. Usually we use English Standard Version or nickname ESV. That translation is so close to the original. We seem to like that best. And anyway, so here's this passage on child rearing, but it starts out by talking about if the Lord, unless the Lord builds the house. And it really is talking about building a home, not just a house. We are very thankful we bought this house. It was a house that was completely remodeled. They gutted this thing, and we just had a painter for the outside who painted the inside. He said, listen, you don't ever want to know what this place looked like, because when we came in, it was
Tore up from the floor up.
Yeah, there was a bullet
Really
hole
bad.
in
I
one
know.
place. So
I know.
this is not good.
Actually, there
but it's a
still is
great
one.
neighborhood. I don't know what
It is.
Yeah, this was the bad people home.
I know.
These were the bad seed in the neighborhood.
We pushed all that bad juju out with some Jesus juju.
Yeah,
when we came
I
in.
don't even know what that means, but yes, I claim that.
Yes.
Anyway, so it's building this home, building this house, but it's not just remodeling; it's building from the floor up, from the ground foundation up, and it's about building a family.
Yes.
And the family unit, as we get into this, it's so important. Every society that is successful has strong families. When you have a breakdown in the family unit, you have a breakdown in the local government, you have a breakdown in national government. Any nation that has breakdown in the family is going to have trouble.
Yeah.
And I believe that we're seeing this kind of across the globe.
It's because
internationally.
the first community is your family.
That's right.
It begins in your family, and then it's your neighborhood, and then it's your town. And
right. There's three primary, and we'll get into this, but there are three primary institutions that God has instituted. The first one is the family. The second one is human government. And the third one is the church. You might say, Israel, but let's just stick with the ones we have operative today. Those are the three. And the first one is the family, that unit, the family unit. It's so important to have a strong, solid family. So here's the first question. The first one is, what are your priorities in parenting? What priorities do you have? We're going to talk about that. The second one is this: how do you develop children with values? In other words, how do you inculcate values into your children so that when they grow up, they'll have those values? The third one is, how do you deal with negative or positive behaviors? So when they do something well, what do you do? When they do something negative, what do you do? We'll talk a little bit about discipline and what that means, and through life stages. And then the fourth question is, are your children a burden or a blessing? And
how do you view your kids?
Yeah, because kids, believe it or not, can be annoying.
Oh, gosh.
Sometimes.
Don't I know it?
Right. Oh, wow. Okay, we have 7, so there's plenty of annoying to go around. And then the fifth question, we'll take 2 weeks to do these 5 questions. What role should you play in your children's future? What time, at what point do you let go? What do you play in their future?
Tough, yep.
And, are they called to do what you did?
Yeah.
Probably
I'm excited
not.
because I feel like this series, nobody gets to walk through parenting with a manual, because we're all figuring it out as we go. And I do feel like we're kind of speaking to what we would have told us in our young 20s when we began this.
Yeah, I wish I had known some things that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
When I had those young children so many years ago. I was a better parent second time around, I think, but still, knowing something and doing something or doing that thing that are difficult.
Well, that's a tweet moment right there.
Yeah,
Knowing
there it is. Tweet it out there.
Something.
Yes, you can quote that anytime you want.
That's good.
All right, so the first question is, what are your priorities in parenting? And the reason this comes from, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. So this idea of building the house with God involved. So what are your priorities in parenting? What would you say our priorities have been?
For sure, our priorities have been family connection, our faith, and our
connection to the Lord, connection to each other, and quality time. I think quality time,
community within our family. Yeah.
We're going to get into discipline, but later on. But when we talk about priorities, I think some people have as a priority to control their children. The reason for that is they see their children. We'll get into this as well. Are your children a blessing, or do you see them as a curse, or some kind of a distraction away from the joy of your life? And so what you end up doing is you discipline your kids for your convenience. You don't want to do a certain thing, or you don't want your kids to do a certain thing so you can do something else. And yet that is the greatest blessing you have, is that child.
Right.
So what's your priority in parenting? You know,
Yeah.
what do you want to produce? What do you want them to
Right.
go, my childhood was like this?
Yeah. So I think what's common in our culture today is, the priorities tend to be what the parents value, which is very cultural often on us living in a first world situation, which is money, success, status, possibly education, entertainment. Those things are not necessarily bad.
Or even like sports.
Sports, for sure. That's one of my big. It's a very sensitive thing because we live in a community that's sports driven. And to be honest with you, we've had kids that have been very involved in sports, but I feel like we have gotten so extremely committed to the sports life where kids actually don't really have a childhood or
Yeah.
even a dinner around the table
Yeah.
at night, and that ends up taking the priority. And so it's like, you're on the go. Even when you're out of work and off of school, you're still on the go trying to
Yeah.
get to the next thing.
Well, like Carrie, when she was little, she was an actress.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of acting things that we had to go to. With Gracie, she is an actress. And she's very good, and we would go watch her
Drama.
plays, and they would have 5 showings, and we would be at all 5.
Yeah.
And then we had
Boys in sports.
boys in sports, football one time,
Water polo,
water
volleyball.
polo, volleyball, big,
Yeah.
and you go to all those things, So, and I think what happens is sometimes it's like there are certain families that are all about the education. They got to
Right.
get the great grades. That's how we're going to maintain our status.
Right.
Some, it's all about the sports.
Right.
So that's how we maintain it. Some, it's all about, getting the right kind of opportunities to make a lot of money. And
Or living in the right place and having
Yeah.
the right friends.
Right.
And just it's a burden too heavy to carry for a child and for a parent to try to keep up with that.
It's been kind of amazing. You bring up friends. It's been amazing to watch our children and the quality friends they've had growing up. I mean, really quality friends.
I think that's answer to prayer.
Yeah.
I do,
Yeah.
because you can't totally keep your kids from hanging out with the wrong people. And there's been some bad ones.
Yeah. There's been a few.
Don't make me
And,
testify.
here's the way to know whether your kids have bad friends or not. You go, all my kids' friends are good kids. It may be that your kid is the bad kid.
Right? Maybe
You know,
he's he or she's the one.
No, none of our listeners,
And don't
of
even
course.
get me started on the dating world,
So-
like the bad eggs there. But
Yeah, here's the thing I think about when you think about priorities in parenting. Like, your child is not just physical, your child is not just emotional, your child is not just spiritual. All of us are body, soul, and spirit. So you have to do things in their years of development that are going to speak to each one of those aspects. It's funny to me, like, speaking of the physical, like, Gracie loves basketball.
yeah, she's so bad.
She's so bad.
She's so bad at
She's
it.
so bad. And what do you say?
There's probably 3
We
times
tell
a
her
week
she's bad.
like, "You want to go shoot hoops with me?" I'm like, "Honey,
She asked
I
me
got a
last
bad
night.
shoulder for that. Number one, number two, I don't know that I've seen you get it through the hoop once. I mean,
It's just true. But they do these videos and they're doing slow-mo. They do
Yes.
slow-mo. Even in slow-mo, it looks
and
bad.
she still misses, and that's what makes it so funny.
Anyway, so, you got the physical things. You've
Yeah.
got exercise,
It's
you've
valuable,
got,
but
yeah,
it's
and
not-
you want them
it
to
shouldn't be
eat
the
right.
priority.
You want them to eat right, but you
Right.
don't want them to be obsessed about food. You don't want them to develop eating disorders by overly emphasizing that. And you don't want your children too young to worry about their weight. But then again, you have to concern yourself with that.
Nutrition. Good
Yeah, nutrition.
yeah.
And, that's so that there's that physical component. There's the soul component, the emotion. And here's what I think about the emotional aspect of a child. If you love them well And what I mean by that is you give them the time. You don't discipline them for being childish. You train them through their childishness. Children are going to be childish. And if you don't know that as a parent, you're going to mess up.
Yes.
But when you try to discipline your child for being childish, you frustrate them.
Yeah.
Discipline your child for rebellion. Discipline your child when they are doing something that you've told them not to do. They're disobeying.
Defiance.
They're defiant. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you discipline them for being, little nerdy kids, that's
Well,
what
yeah,
they are.
and kids push buttons, and
Yeah.
they, we've all done in small and very big ways. We learn by messing up.
Yeah. Well, little Valor, he's our
grandson,
youngest grandchild. We have 6. He's the number 6, and he's kind of the obsession of our family every family night. And he'll go like this. He'll have a cup, and he's just holding the
Sippy
cup.
cup, yeah.
Yeah, sippy cup, and he'll just take it, throw it.
Check it and look at you like, what you gonna do about it?
What just went on? Or he'll take food and just, nope.
Yeah.
And then he's like, more, and he does this sign language. They taught him sign
wants
language,
more,
and I guess this means more. Or get out of my way, I'll punch you.
Yeah.
But anyway, more, and then his mom doesn't respond because, like, okay, you've had enough. Please. Can he say please? And he just,
But it's so.
But then when he gets it, when he's done, he's like, okay, I'm done. I've had enough of this. And he's throwing stuff and like,
he's being a kid.
Yeah.
That's what kids do.
Yeah. But you have to train them through that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So when he is kind of in a rebellious state, his mom is teaching him like how to, like respond to direction and then pull him back on that. And then he's in rebellion.
Yeah.
Now you've got a discipline
Right.
for that.
Yeah, then you follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to
So-
cover all the different stages of life and the discipline there too. Yeah.
But when he says God must build the house, all strategies, I believe, have to come back to how God is involved. So that's the spirit.
Yeah.
So it's body, soul, and spirit.
Right.
So what have you done, Kimberly, for the kids in the spiritual? I know several things, but I'd like to hear what you think. Like your morning routine and stuff like that is what I'm
I
thinking
would
about.
say are you talking about the young stages, the early years,
Yeah,
developmental? Because I'll be honest, and I think most young moms can relate to this. I did not have time for in-depth devotions in the morning.
Yeah, but when we got married, what did you do in the morning?
Okay,
That's
but
what
I
I'm
want to
talking
speak
about.
to young moms
Okay,
a minute
all right.
because I feel like saying that is setting a standard that's
Okay,
unachievable
gotcha,
for young moms.
gotcha, yeah.
So it depends on the stages. Of course, I had 5 children. They were, 10 years apart, oldest to youngest. So that was challenging because I always had a baby. So oftentimes in the morning, what I almost always did was I would have worship music playing as we're getting ready. And usually it's frantically through the mornings getting ready for the day. One of the other things that I found as we got all into a car is they're trapped, which is ideal.
Yeah.
And then I would also put on either worship that's kid worship that they could relate to and enjoy and sing the songs, or some kind of radio,
Yeah. So that's something a young mother can do.
a young mom can pull that
Yeah.
off. Or
It's no time commitment.
Right. And in our current culture, obviously, podcasting is cool.
Yeah.
Or even putting on a podcast for kids, storytelling through, through your smartphone or whatever in the car. But helping them to understand very early on that what the presence of the Lord looks like. And it comes through worship and the word and a willing heart, and not overcomplicating that. Even as they get older, I started having devotions when I could get a margin of time. In those years, I began to have the routine of just reading a few scriptures in the morning for myself, and I'd try to get up earlier than them. And if I couldn't, then I'd sit down with them and I'd just shoot the scriptures out. I do it to this day. Whoever's home, I'll say, "Listen to this," and it's just a passage. No big deal. Not a break. We don't break it down and teach it through, but it gives us something to talk about, and it's about a way of inviting Jesus into your daily routines and making him Lord over the small things, which creates the setup for him to be Lord of the big things.
I like this. When we talk about priorities, and that's the question we're answering, what are your priorities in parenting? I've observed what you do with Valor when he's with us and you put him to bed.
Yeah.
Kind of do that.
We have a
little-
routine. So I knew I'd have to start consistently because we've had 2 homes with him now. This is our second home. But when you have a routine with a child, they feel safe.
Yeah.
Wherever they are.
Yeah, it gives them
So,
stability.
so our routine when I started watching him when I was a baby was before bedtime, we try to read if we can or just look through a book. But on the way to bed, I would start singing Jesus Loves Me.
Yeah.
And we would pull the curtains and I would close them together with him watching and we'd finish the song and then I'd lay him down and pray for him. And he had his favorite snuggle blanket and his favorite snuggle toy. And that's our routine.
And then you walk out and he starts screaming.
And no, that's the beautiful part. He had music on, so he goes to sleep. So even when we moved into this house, it was so sweet because it's a totally different bedroom, but he knows the routine and you can almost feel like his little shoulders relaxing into it, like he knows. And it's so sweet. I just want to share this because I've been over there twice with my adult children, Ronnie and Cassie, and they've been putting him to bed and they walk down the hall together with him singing Jesus Loves Me. It's become their routine.
Yeah, that's
and I
cool.
never ever said anything or instructed it, but that's now his routine.
Yeah.
And it just blesses my heart because it was never intentional to be something like that. But that's precious. Those are the things you catch and you're caught, not necessarily taught.
So I know we have men and women that listen, and some of you men are here, and well, that's what mothers do. That's not just what mothers do. That's what fathers do as well. And I think it's important for you fathers. It's important to do it for your daughters. But for some reason, I feel this need to address a father to a son. It's very important to show that affection, make it a priority, and touch them, body, soul, and spirit, so that they have that beautiful affection from a godly father. They have that, your soul connecting with his soul and her soul, your daughters. And then also that be a spiritual leader. You don't have to pray a long prayer, just a short little prayer that says God's important in our lives. And then spiritual input, whether it's, maybe you shouldn't sing if you can't sing. I know I'm not a singer, but to just share a little scriptural truth that maybe you learned in church or maybe you've picked it up in a devotional or whatever. You just share something so that they know that the Word of God is important, that prayer is important, that God cares about their lives. And I think that will be a powerful thing. Well, we only got through one question
We
today,
did. Well,
but we've got
this might be a
4
longer
more to
series.
go. So we may have to stretch this
Yeah.
onto more than just a couple of weeks. But next week, we're going to come back. We're going to answer this question. How do you develop your children's values? How do you develop children's values? And that's so important. And we're going to talk about that. And as far as we get on that, we'll see.
We'll see how we
But
do.
thanks for joining us on Hope Rescue podcast. And we're going to invite you to bring your friends to join on this podcast. We deal with all kinds of things, whether it's parenting or marriage or biblical things, theology, doctrine, and so forth.
Mental
We'd
health.
love for
Yeah.
mental health. We'd love for you to come and join us. HopeRescuePodcast.org. Thanks for joining with us. We'll see you next week.